Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that the insurance industry could actually be a major player in, solving some of the world's biggest crises. We'll be looking at this article, Insuring the Future, how the industry can save the world from crisis.
Okay. Interesting.
And just to give you a taste, we're talking about things like, insurers actually preventing disasters, not just paying for them after they happen.
That's a big shift.
It is. And using all this crazy tech like AI to, predict and mitigate risks.
Fascinating.
And the idea of insurance actually becoming like a force for good in the world.
Yeah.
Not just
profits.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
So to help us unpack all of this, we have an expert joining us today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in. This article talks about the insurance industry kind of going through this identity shift, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
Going from just managing risk to almost being like world builders. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's like, think about a doctor who not only treats you when you're sick, but also helps you stay healthy in the first place.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And a big part of the shift is this thing called the Principles for Sustainable Insurance, or PSI.
Yes, the PSI.
So what's the big idea behind this PSI?
So the PSI is really all about shifting that mindset, like you said, from just managing risk to actually, like you said, building a more sustainable and resilient world. And big shift for the industry, right? It outlines these 4 key pillars. You've got embedding sustainability in every decision, educating clients about all these environmental, social, governance risks, ESG, we call it.
Right.
Committing to transparency.
Okay.
And then collaborating with a bunch of different stakeholders.
So it's not just about like what's happening inside insurance companies?
No, not at all. It's about them using their influence to kind of push for change on a much bigger scale.
Bigger scale, yep.
But the article really stresses this sense of urgency around all of this. Like it's a now or never kind of moment.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, think about the cost of natural disasters. Just that alone. 2023, globally, we saw $120 billion in insured losses.
Wow.
From natural disasters. $120 billion.
That's unbelievable.
Huge number. And, with climate change getting worse,
right,
these costs are just going to keep going up.
It's only going to get worse.
Exactly.
So for insurance companies, this is like a major wake-up call, right?
It is. I mean, the old way of just paying out after disaster strikes, it's just not going to work anymore.
Doesn't work.
So the PSI is really pushing them to get ahead of it, to become more proactive.
So how do they do that? I mean, what does that even look like for an insurance company to be proactive about it?
There's a few things they can do. One of them is this thing called green underwriting practices. Okay. And that's basically taking environmental factors into account when they're assessing risk.
Interesting.
Also shifting their investments, right? Moving away from fossil fuels into renewable energy projects.
So they're not just mitigating their own risk.
Right.
They're actually contributing to solutions.
Exactly.
For the planet.
That's the idea.
Oh, wow.
And then there's things like parametric insurance, which could be a real game changer. These are policies that pay out based on like a predefined trigger.
Okay.
So say rainfall exceeding a certain level.
I see.
Instead of waiting for the actual damage to happen.
It's a little more immediate.
It is much faster relief.
Especially helpful in places that are vulnerable to drought or flooding.
Exactly.
It seems like it could be a real lifeline for those
It really could.
Communities.
Yeah.
Much more efficient than the traditional way of doing things.
For sure. And this kind of highlights another big part of the PSI, which is bridging the gap between those who have access to insurance and those who don't.
Right, because the article paints a pretty stark picture of inequality when it comes to insurance access.
Millions of people, especially in developing countries, they don't have access to even the most basic.
It's leaving them extremely vulnerable.
Incredibly vulnerable to all kinds of shocks. Illness, natural disasters, economic downturns.
This reminds me of a story I read about a farmer in Bangladesh.
Oh, yeah.
Lost everything in a flood.
Wow.
No insurance. Had to sell his land.
Oh, that's all.
Move his family to a slum in Dhaka.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, really highlights the human cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
This lack of access.
And that's exactly what the PSI is trying to address through inclusive insurance, right? Making sure that everyone has access to insurance, not just those who can afford the expensive premium.
So inclusive insurance is a huge part of this, but beyond protecting individuals.
Right.
How can insurance actually make economies stronger?
That's where the idea of resilience comes in. So a resilient economy is one that can withstand shocks, recover quickly, and insurers can actually play a big role.
So they can kind of encourage businesses, even cities, to adopt practices that make them less vulnerable.
That's the idea.
What would that look like in the real world?
Well, imagine, I don't know, getting a discount on your insurance for having a green building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or cities getting rewarded for investing in disaster-proof infrastructure.
I see. So using insurance to steer capital towards initiatives that create a more
sustainable and stable economy.
Okay.
That's the goal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But the insurance industry has always seemed, pretty traditional, kind of slow to change.
Yeah.
What's driving this sudden shift?
I think one of the biggest drivers, honestly, is technology.
Technology. Figured that would come into play.
It always does, right?
It always does. So how is tech being used to, as the article puts it, build a better world?
Well, we're seeing things like AI-driven risk modeling, the Internet of Things. All of this stuff is really transforming the insurance landscape.
So AI-driven risk modeling, what does that even mean?
Basically, insurers can use all this data to predict and assess risks with incredible accuracy.
So instead of just looking at the past, they can use AI to get a better sense of...
Exactly. A clearer picture.
Of the future.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the Internet of Things? How does that fit in?
Okay, well, think about your car insurance.
Okay.
What if it was based on your actual driving habits? Sensors tracking your speed, your braking, your mileage.
So that usage-based insurance that some companies are already doing.
Exactly. That's only going to become more common.
Wow.
Right. IoT devices can give insurers all this real-time data, which leads to much more personalized and dynamic risk assessment, which in turn can encourage safer, more sustainable behavior.
Interesting. So we've got this PSI framework, this urgency to address these global challenges and this incredible potential of technology. What else is needed to make this whole idea of a world-saving insurance industry a reality?
Collaboration.
Okay.
The article really emphasizes public-private partnerships, PPPs, tackling these big global challenges. No single entity can do it alone.
Right.
It's not even a massive industry like insurance.
It's like a team sport.
It is, exactly.
Everyone brings their strengths to the table.
Absolutely.
So what would those partnerships look like? Can you give us an example?
Imagine like a climate resilience fund that pools resources from both the public and private sector to protect coastal communities from rising sea levels.
That's a good one.
Or a PPP that provides microinsurance to farmers in drought-prone areas, helping them cope with climate-related losses.
It seems like PPPs could be especially effective for those kinds of issues that cross borders require a large scale.
They allow for a much more integrated approach, bringing in diverse perspectives and expertise to develop more effective and sustainable solutions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Shifting mindsets within the industry, the potential of technology, the importance of collaboration. It does seem like they could be a force for good. Is there anything else that's critical?
I think the one other crucial piece is transparency.
Transparency. That's an interesting one. The insurance industry hasn't always been known for being super open and accountable.
No, not really. But the PSI is pushing for a big shift in this area. It emphasizes things like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD for short.
So that's basically it.
It encourages companies to be more transparent about how climate change might impact their business.
So they're not just talking about the risks they insure other people for.
No.
They're also acknowledging their own vulnerability to climate change.
Yeah, exactly. And how they're managing those risks, how they're contributing to the transition to a low-carbon economy.
So how does transparency tie into this bigger picture of building a more sustainable and resilient future?
Well, for one thing, it builds trust.
Okay.
When insurers are open about their practices, their commitment to sustainability, it builds confidence with investors, consumers, regulators.
It shows they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. And transparency also drives positive change, right?
So.
When companies have to disclose their climate-related risks, it forces them to take those risks seriously and actually develop strategies to mitigate them. It shines a light on the problem and makes it much harder to ignore.
So it's a powerful tool for holding companies accountable.
Yeah.
And pushing them to act in a more
For sure.
responsible and sustainable way.
Absolutely.
This has been a really insightful deep dive so far. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, though. Can you give us some more concrete examples of how this is actually playing out in the real world? Like, how is the industry actually putting these ideas into practice?
Yeah, for sure. So many cool things happening out there, but one that comes to mind is the Global Index Insurance Facility.
Oh, yeah.
GIF.
GIF, yep.
Okay, so remind me again.
Mm-hmm.
How does index-based insurance?
Right, so it's insurance that pays out based on a predefined trigger.
Okay.
So like a certain amount of rainfall or crop yield rather than the actual losses.
I see.
So instead of waiting to assess individual losses, which can be really difficult.
Yeah, especially in places where
they just don't have the infrastructure. The payout is automatic when that trigger is met.
that's so much more efficient.
It's way more efficient, and that's why it's so valuable for these weather-related risks, which are obviously becoming more and more frequent with climate change.
Right.
So WIF helps develop and scale up these types of insurance products.
Making them more accessible to, like, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, vulnerable communities.
So instead of waiting for disaster to strike
Exactly.
and then hoping for aid,
Yeah, which may or may not come.
these communities have like a safety net built in.
They have a safety net. It's about making them more resilient in the face of climate change.
And it's not just about the money, right?
It's not just about the money. Index insurance can actually incentivize good behavior.
How so?
So if a farmer knows they're going to get a payout if rainfall is below a certain level, they might be more likely to adopt drought-resistant crops.
Right.
Or water conservation techniques.
Yeah, prepare for that risk.
Exactly. It's not just reacting to risk, it's encouraging people to manage it.
I like that.
And GIF is just one example. Another one I find really interesting is the African Risk Capacity, the ARC.
Okay, the ARC. And that's
Specialized agency of the African Union provides drought insurance to African countries.
Hold on. So we're talking insurance for
all countries, yeah.
Entire countries.
It's a really cool model. So participating countries pay premiums into this pool.
Okay.
If a drought hits a certain severity level, boom, payout.
Wow.
That they can use to fund these pre-approved drought contingency plans.
So they have immediate access to those funds to help their citizens.
They do.
Instead of waiting for.
Exactly. Instead of waiting international assistance.
And the impact has been amazing. I mean, it's already helped countries like Senegal, Mauritania, and Niger respond to droughts much more effectively, protected millions of people from hunger.
Really shows how insurance can be scaled up to manage risk on like a national level.
Absolutely.
Build resilience.
Huge scale, on a massive scale.
And we're seeing similar initiatives pop up all over the world. The Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, the CCRIF SPC, provides insurance against tropical cyclones and earthquakes to these Caribbean island nations.
Pretty amazing to see all these new approaches to these global challenges.
It is.
And it seems like technology is a huge driver behind all this.
Absolutely. Huge driver. You mentioned AI and big data earlier. What are some real-world examples of how those are being used?
Well, one area is personalized insurance.
Okay.
Traditionally, insurance policies have been pretty generic. But with AI and big data, insurers can now tailor policies to individual needs and behaviors.
So instead of everyone paying the same based on these broad risk categories, you could have a policy designed just for you based on all this data about your lifestyle, your health-driving habits, and so on.
And it makes pricing fairer, coverage more relevant.
I see.
So, for instance, some health insurance companies are using AI to analyze data from, like wearable fitness trackers.
Interesting.
Assess individual health risks and offer personalized premiums.
It's like having a personal insurance advisor.
Yeah, kind of.
Who helps you understand your own risk.
In a way, it is, and it's not just individuals either.
AI and big data can also help manage risk for businesses, even entire cities.
Cities. Okay, how did that work?
So imagine a city using sensors and data analytics to monitor things like traffic patterns, air quality, infrastructure.
Interesting.
And then use that data to develop insurance products that help the city mitigate risk and respond more effectively to like natural disasters or cyber attacks.
So it's like an insurance policy for the entire...
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Urban ecosystem.
It is, and this is really just the beginning, right? As technology keeps getting better, we'll see even more innovative uses of AI and big data in the insurance industry.
That's exciting.
It is exciting, but we also got to be mindful of the potential downsides.
Oh, of course. Like what?
Well, all this relies on data,
right,
which can be hard to come by in developing countries. The infrastructure might not be there.
Makes sense.
And even when we do have the data, we have to be careful about privacy and security.
Yeah, that's a big one. People are concerned about how their data is being used, especially when it comes to things like health and finances.
Of course. So we have to have strong regulations, ethical guidelines for data use. The industry needs to work with governments, regulators to build trust.
But to make sure the data is being used responsibly.
Exactly.
Ethically.
Yeah. So lots of opportunity, but also some real challenges as this unfolds. What are some other hurdles the industry has to overcome to really achieve this vision?
Yeah, data is a big one, but there's also affordability.
Yeah.
We've talked about inclusive insurance,
right,
reaching those who are most vulnerable, but even microinsurance might be too expensive for some low-income populations.
A tough one.
It is tough, but there's some interesting ideas out there.
Like what?
Some insurers are trying out different payment models.
Okay.
Like pay-as-you-go.
I see.
Or linking insurance to mobile money platforms.
Ah, so making it more accessible, more
flexible,
flexible for people who maybe can't afford those big
lump sum premiums.
Right.
So besides cost, what are some other things?
Well, another big challenge is awareness.
Okay.
You can have the best insurance product in the world,
right?
But if people don't know about it or don't understand it,
it's not going
to do any good.
Do much.
Right.
So education's a big.
Yeah. Education and outreach are key.
Part of this.
Insurers need to partner with community leaders.
Okay.
NGOs, trusted sources to get the word out. Especially in communities that may have had bad experiences with financial institutions in the past.
Right. Building trust is so important. People need to feel like insurance can actually help them.
Help them protect their families, their livelihoods.
Right. Not something to be...
Yeah, not something to be scared of.
Afraid of.
It takes time, but it's essential for building a more resilient society.
And this isn't just about the insurance industry.
No, this is about all of us.
This is about
working together to create a better future.
So what can we do as individuals?
Well, as a consumer, you can support companies that are committed to sustainability.
Okay.
Social responsibility.
Choose insurers that align with
your values.
And as citizens, we can advocate for policies that promote inclusive insurance.
Push for a more resilient, equitable society.
It's a movement that needs everyone, from individuals to policymakers.
Yeah. Every
action counts.
Big or small.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. I mean, we went from the big picture all the way down to the
individual level.
And it seems like the insurance industry is...
Yeah, it's on the verge of a major transformation.
Really at a turning point.
Yeah, moving from just paying for damages to actually preventing them in the first place.
And that's something that could benefit...
Absolutely.
All of us.
It really could make the world a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable place.
It's a tough road ahead, but the possibilities are pretty amazing.
They are huge.
So, as we wrap up, any final thoughts? What do you want to leave our listener with?
I want you to imagine a world where your insurance company isn't just there to pay you when something bad happens, but they're working to prevent those bad things from ever happening.
That's powerful.
That's the future, and it's a future worth building.
That's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of insurance.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.